Hey, it's Senator James Lankford. Obviously, the big story has been the leak from the Supreme Court and what has actually occurred based on that leak. And then to find out the leak wasn't just a leak, it was actually authentic. So let me just walk back from the last 24 hours. About 24 hours ago, there's word from the Supreme Court that's a leak that comes out that is the draft first option for an opinion dealing with Roe v. Wade. This deals with the what's called the Dobbs decision out of Mississippi. That the Supreme Court has looked at it. Five of the justices have determined they want to overturn Roe v. Wade and the Casey decision, and they want to send this all back to the people in the legislature. Enormous thing. Initially, I looked at it and was, like everyone else, shocked that there was a leak coming out of the Supreme Court because that never happens. And then I thought this could be fake. I'm not going to really buy into this. I'm not sure if this is really real or not. But then today, this afternoon, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts, he releases out that actual leak is authentic. That was a draft from February, but he's saying it has changed. It's not the final version, so we don't know what that really means, other than they're doing an investigation to try to find out how a leak came out of the Supreme Court to be able to get there, which literally never happens. What does that do to us, though? Obviously, for years, we've been working on judges and try to get conservative judges into courts. We are not able to ask them how they're going to rule on cases. We don't know. All they're asking is the most basic thing. Are you going to follow the law? Are you going to follow the law and the Constitution? That's the main focus, because they can't tell us how they're going to rule on an issue like Roe v. Wade or other things. It'll depend on the case that's actually in front of them. What we focused in on justices and on judges is people that will just read the law and will just follow that. If this opinion actually holds true, it would be historic in so many ways, not just historic for this horrible leak coming out of the Supreme Court, but historic in that they go back and look at the Roe v. Wade decision, challenge it, and to say that the court in 1973 should have never ruled the way that they did, that the issue of when does life begin is not settled by a court. That should be settled by the people through their legislative branch. That is, that they actually have votes in different states, like we have done in Oklahoma, like other states have done, to be able to determine how to be able to resolve when life begins. This is just like lots of other issues dealing with life or with difficult challenges. I had a conversation with a friend talking about the issue of child abuse and how do you define child abuse? Well, there's a little different definitions in different states on that, but we all know that we want to be able to protect the life of that child. But each state has a slightly different way to be able to address that issue. When you start dealing with the issue of life, that's not a court issue, that's a people issue, that's a legislative branch issue to be able to deal with. So this would go back to our state, and it would also be the federal legislature as well to be able to determine national policy and state policy. We're all waiting. We don't know when the actual final opinion is going to come out, and there's no way to know if one of those justices that was signed on in February as being opposed to Roe v. Wade actually flips on it in the days ahead. We're all praying, we're all watching, we're all staying engaged on this. But it was an optimistic note with a frustrating leak that's in the middle of it to be able to say that this is the potential that across the entire country we could have a move to be able to protect the most valuable thing that we have in all the country. That's our children. I have to tell you, it's been shocking going through the area around the Supreme Court as I was walking into a meeting today and walked right past the Supreme Court, and just to see hundreds of people just screaming, angry, screaming at the front door of the court and chanting back and forth, protesting for the right to be able to take the life of a child. I don't understand that. And I know people try to explain it to me, but these are individuals screaming at the front door of the Supreme Court, say, you can't take away my right to take the life of children. I don't agree. I think every child is precious. They're arguing and saying some children are disposable, that that's a child we can just throw away, that's no big deal, we'll make more later. I just don't agree. I think every child is valuable and precious. I think there's something unique about that child, even from the moment that they're conceived. That DNA is different than the mom's DNA, different than the dad's DNA. That DNA is growing and developing. And the only difference between that child at conception and that child at birth is 40 weeks' time. I am 40 weeks older than I was in July of last year. But that child is developing 40 weeks, is also developing. The only difference in that child then and now is time. And I continue to be able to reinforce that over and over again. And I'm optimistic that the court is now looking at this finally in the way that we can set aside a terrible time in American history when literally the court was compelling all states to impose on them that there had to be children having their life thrown away, when now this goes back to our states and to the federal legislature to be able to decide where it should be decided among the American people. So that's all moving this week. By the way, there's two other big issues. I've been fighting on Iran for a while in dealing with the Iranian nuclear agreement. We have a vote that's happening tomorrow on Iran, whether my Democratic colleagues, though some of them are trying to block it, they're not going to be able to stop it at this point. We're trying to be able to have a very simple, straightforward conversation about what can and cannot be in a nuclear agreement with Iran, because this matters to American safety. If Iran has a nuclear weapon, we know how we're having to deal with Russia right now as a nuclear power, or with North Korea as a nuclear power. I can't imagine this regime in Iran being a nuclear power. My beef is not with the Iranian people. There's a lot of great folks that are Iranian people, but the regime that they're living under is heavily destructive and is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and they cannot have a nuclear weapon. So I'm forcing a vote on this in the Senate tomorrow. In the middle of everything else, we can't lose track of a heavily armed nuclear Iran. We're also meeting tomorrow in the committee that I serve on with Ali Mayorkas, who's the Secretary of Homeland Security. We have a lot of issues to deal with on border security, on what's happening with FEMA, but then also this new disinformation governance board that he just kind of quietly tried to slip into a budget piece last week to literally have part of the Homeland Security dealing with disinformation. Let me just tell you, that's a press issue. That's not a federal government issue. It's not the role of the federal government to be able to look across people's Facebook pages and whatever it may be and say this is disinformation or non-disinformation. And I just tell you, it was this federal government that was declaring that the Hunter Biden laptop was probably a Russian conspiracy on it. Well, that was actually disinformation. That was not true, because the Hunter Biden laptop is accurate, is real, is really his laptop with all that information on it. It was this government that in 2016, into 2016 and early 2017, was trying to say the Trump election was a Russian conspiracy, and there was this Steele dossier with all these horrible accusations into it. That was actual disinformation, because that was from the Clinton campaign. So for this administration to be able to step up and say, we're going to be the arbiter of all things fact and fiction, is just not, it's laughable, number one. Number two, it's not the role of the federal government. And number three, that is actually the role of the press, and to have an open, free press. And I'm with you, I disagree a lot with the press. But as long as we can get other people that are also challenging the press and we can get the facts and information out there, that's actually the fact check for the American people, not someone in the Biden administration. So that's going to be part of our dialogue tomorrow with Ali Mayorkas. We're not even halfway through this week, and there's a lot going on, both with Ukraine, Russia, with the Dobbs decision and protecting life in America, with national security issues with our southern border, with the Disinformation Governance Board, and then so many other areas that we're getting a chance to be able to walk through, not to mention budget areas and other things. So busy week. We're going to keep going because there's a lot more that still needs to get done. So thanks for tuning in. Look forward to reading your comments and get a chance to follow through.